The rain was tapping against the windows that evening, soft yet persistent, as though the heavens were trying to write their own story across the glass panes. I sat in my study, the lamp casting a dim glow on the scattered papers and the unfinished letter I had been trying to write all week. My life had grown into a routine of silence and predictable echoes, and while many would have envied the tranquility of such an existence, I often found it unbearably hollow. I had lived alone in that house for years. It was a sprawling, old-style residence passed down from my parents, filled with wooden staircases, high ceilings, and endless corridors that seemed to carry secrets in their shadows. Yet, despite its grandeur, the house felt lifeless, almost like a museum, until she came along. Her name was Aliyah, a young woman hired to help with the housework when I could no longer manage everything by myself. She had an air of simplicity and warmth, the kind that could soften even the hardest edges of a place. She wasn't just diligent in her work. She carried with her a quiet presence, as though she belonged not to the noise of the world but to its pauses. At first, I hardly noticed her beyond the duties she performed. She dusted the antique cabinets, kept the kitchen in perfect order, and always greeted me with a respectful nod. But over time, I began to sense that her presence was more than functional. When she walked into a room, the silence seemed less suffocating. When she spoke, even briefly, the air carried a lighter tone. That night, though, was different. I had been sitting in the study, my head heavy with the burden of unfinished thoughts, when exhaustion overcame me. The rain grew louder, and I leaned back in my chair, meaning only to rest my eyes for a moment. Somewhere between the tick of the clock and the whisper of the storm, I drifted into a shallow sleep. It must have been quite late when I stirred awake. The lamp was still glowing faintly, my papers spread around like fallen leaves. I reached for the glass of water on the desk, only to realize it was empty. With a sigh, I prepared to stand when the door creaked open. At first, I thought it was the wind. But then she stepped in, Aliyah, holding a tray with a fresh jug of water and a small plate of fruit. Her face held a look of hesitation, almost guilt, as though she hadn't intended to wake me. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the patter of rain. "I noticed you hadn't eaten. I thought maybe you'd need this." For a long moment, I just looked at her. There was something so profoundly thoughtful in her gesture, something that went beyond the duties of her work. She hadn't been asked to do this. She had simply cared enough to notice. "Thank you," I finally said, my voice rough from sleep. She placed the tray gently on the table, her eyes avoiding mine as though unsure if she had crossed some invisible line. The lamplight touched her face, highlighting the quiet determination in her features, the way her hair framed her expression like a halo. She was not dressed in anything extraordinary, just the simple clothes she always wore while working. Yet, in that moment, she carried a kind of grace that startled me. "Why do you always look after me this way?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her hands froze on the tray. For a second, I thought she might retreat without answering. But then she looked at me, really looked, her eyes steady and unflinching. "Because I know what loneliness looks like," she said softly. Her words pierced through me. Loneliness. Yes, that was the shadow that had followed me for years. It lived in the empty halls, in the silence of meals taken alone, in the unopened letters on my desk. And somehow she had seen it, named it, and cared enough to respond to it. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded, and for the first time in years, I allowed someone's presence to fill the silence without rushing to push it away. That was the night everything began to change. The days that followed unfolded differently. I found myself paying attention to the smallest details of her presence. The way she hummed softly while sweeping the courtyard. The way she adjusted the flowers in the vase as though they deserved the same attention as people. She wasn't just a maid. She was someone who carried light into corners that had long been dark. Conversations began to sprout between us, first as casual exchanges about the house, then slowly about books, about the rain, about dreams she had tucked away. She told me about her younger siblings, how she worked to support their education, how she wanted them to grow up with opportunities she never had. There was a selflessness in her that humbled me, a strength born not from ease but from endurance. I, in turn, found myself sharing things I hadn't voiced in years, the pressure of expectations, the grief of losing people too soon, the emptiness of chasing goals that no longer mattered. She listened without judgment, with the kind of attention that made even the heaviest truths feel lighter. One evening, I noticed her standing by the window, watching the sunset. The light painted her face in hues of orange and gold, and I realized how much I had come to rely on her presence. Without her, the house would collapse back into its silence. With her, it felt like a home. Do you ever think about leaving? I asked gently. She turned to me, surprised by the question. Leaving, she echoed. Yes, I said. When your siblings are grown, when your responsibilities are lighter, what will you do then? Her expression softened. I don't know, she admitted. But sometimes I wonder if, maybe staying in one place long enough can make it feel like it belongs to you. The words lingered in the air, weaving themselves into my thoughts. Was she speaking of the house? Or of something else entirely? As weeks passed, my feelings grew in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't sudden. It was like water seeping quietly into the roots of a tree, nourishing it from within until one day it bloomed without warning. I realized I was no longer just grateful for her kindness. I longed for it, for her presence, for the way she made everything feel alive. But I also knew the fragility of such feelings. She was an employee. I was her employer. The lines were clear, and yet my heart refused to respect them. I feared that speaking too much would break the delicate bond we had built, so I remained silent, waiting, hoping. Then came the night that changed everything again. It was another stormy evening. The electricity had gone out, and the house was plunged into darkness. I lit a few candles and sat in the living room, the shadows dancing against the walls. She appeared with a lantern in hand, her face illuminated in a soft glow. Are you afraid of the dark? She asked lightly, trying to ease the heaviness of the storm outside. No, I said. Not when you're here. She stopped, her eyes searching mine for something unspoken. The silence stretched, filled only by the rhythm of rain and thunder. In that moment, the truth between us felt undeniable, yet fragile, like a flame vulnerable to the wind. Aliyah, I said quietly, I don't know when it happened, but you've changed everything for me. This house, this life, it feels different because of you. Her eyes glistened. The weather from the lantern light or something else, I couldn't tell. She took a step closer, her voice steady but filled with emotion.